let's talk about Boudicca, the warrior queen who avenged rape. I'm your host, and this is the channel. Today, we bring you the story of Boudicca, a legendary Celtic warrior queen from Britain who has inspired countless works of art and literature throughout history. When her husband was murdered and she was violated in turn by the invading Romans, she took arms into her own hands to avenge his death and punish those responsible. But before we dive into the gritty details, let me ask you guys for a quick favor. If you love badass historical tales like Boudicca's, then please consider supporting us. Now let's get back to the story. In the 1st century AD, Roman rule in Britain was a turbulent affair. While the legions of Rome had managed to subdue much of the island, fierce resistance continued in the tribal heartlands of the east and the north. Among these tribes lived a young woman named Boudicca, the daughter of a local chieftain named Cut. According to historical records, Cogitabnus was an ally of the Roman Empire and ruled over the Catuvellauni tribe with the title of Basileus, a term used by the Romans to address their kings. The kingdom of Cogitabnus was located near the modern-day English town of Hemel Hempstead, not too far from London, and it was here that Boudicca grew up in relative peace, enjoying the benefits of trade with the Roman Empire while maintaining a significant degree of autonomy. At some point in her early life, Boudicca was betrothed to a chieftain named Tacitus, who ruled over the neighboring Iceni tribe. However, details about their marriage are scarce, and most of what we know comes from a single passage in a letter written by the Roman philosopher Pliny. In the letter, Pliny discusses the issue of granting Roman citizenship to the queen of the Iceni tribe, presumably Prototagus's widow. According to Pliny, the queen had been granted the privileges of a Roman woman by her late husband, but was now being denied the full rights of citizenship because she wasn't born in Italy. It seems that Boudicca's efforts to obtain Roman citizenship were ultimately successful, since coins minted during the reign of her son, Prototagus II, bear the legend, Regina, meaning queen. This suggests that she held a certain degree of power within the kingdom, and was likely known as the Queen of the Iceni, the clan when Prototagus was killed by the Roman army in 60 AD under the command of the governor Suetonius. You see, the province of Britannia had been in a state of constant unrest since the legions first set foot on its shores, and the governors of the province were keen to snuff out any rebellion before it flared into open war. Prototagus had long been a thorn in the side of the Romans, and his close relationship with another chief, Queen Aemon of the Trinobonts, made him a dangerous ally to have. So when he died, the Romans suspected foul play. They began to suspect that he had been poisoned, and they turned their suspicions on Boudicca, believing that she had killed her husband to inherit his throne. Of course, there is no evidence to support this claim, and it is possible that the Romans simply wanted to justify their invasion of the Ice territory by painting Boudicca as a wicked queen who murdered her own husband. Either way, the Romans invaded the kingdom of Prototagus, looted and burned his capital city, and put his widow and children in chains. When the soldiers came to arrest Boudicca, she was in her ceremonial bath. They dragged her out of the bath and threw her into a chariot, where they beat her with rods until her body was covered in blood. Then they violated her in turn as punishment for her supposed crimes. After the Romans left, Boudicca managed to escape captivity with her 2 daughters, though the exact circumstances surrounding her escape are unknown. Some sources say that the daughters were conceived during the violation, and some even claim that Boudicca was pregnant at the time of her capture. Regardless, she escaped with her daughters and went on the run, rallying other tribes along the way to join her. The Romans would soon feel the wrath of the so-called Boudiccan revolt. In total, around 100,000 warriors rose up against the invaders. The revolt spread like wildfire, catching the Romans completely off guard. Before long, the entire eastern part of Britannia was in open rebellion. Bandits joined the fight, and whole families fled their villages rather than submit to the invaders. One of the most famous accounts of the revolt comes from the historian Cassius Dio, who writes that Boudicca led the rebellion with the fury of a lioness robbed of her cubs. According to Dio, Boudicca's forces pillaged the province, killing all the Romans in their path. She spared no one, not even women or children, and she ordered that all the survivors be crucified. That might sound a bit dramatic, but it's important to keep in mind that Dio was writing over a century after the revolt, so some of the more lurid details may have been added for dramatic effect. Regardless, it's clear that Boudicca's forces were extremely effective and caught the Romans completely off guard. She and her followers laid siege to the Roman towns of Camilla, now Colchester, Londinium, now London, and possibly even the legionary fortress of Athona. These attacks resulted in the deaths of nearly 70,000 Romans, At this point, the Roman world was shaken. Never before had the barbarians of Britannia proven to be such fierce opponents. Emperor Nero himself became involved and sent a delegation to negotiate with Boudicca. However, the talks failed, and the emperor prepared to send his own legions to restore order in the province. Unfortunately for Boudicca, the Roman reinforcements didn't arrive in time to save the cities in her path. As she and her army rampaged across the countryside, she executed all of the Roman prisoners that she captured, and it was said that she treated them worse than slaves, beating them and forcing them to carry loads of stones. As her forces approached the city of Londinium, the local garrison commander Petilius Carialis decided to flee rather than defend the city. This gave Boudicca's forces free rein to pillage and burn the city, which they did with great zeal. Next, her army turned its attention to the capital of the province. This time, the garrison commander, Aulus Plautius, decided to make a stand. He assembled his troops and prepared to defend the city. However, his efforts were in vain as Boudicca and her warriors attacked from three sides, forcing him and his men to retreat. Once again, the Romans suffered heavy casualties as Boudicca's forces slaughtered anyone who tried to flee the city. To make matters worse, the retreating Roman soldiers accidentally set fire to the city gate. The fire spread quickly and soon the whole city was a fiery inferno. In the end, some 80,000 people lost their lives in the attack. With the two biggest cities in the province destroyed, Boudicca's forces turned their attention to the legionary fortress of Here, they faced off against the Legio to aid. According to tradition, the Romans were able to defeat Boudicca and her followers at the Battle of Medway, near the modern-day English town of Rochester, and many sources claim that Boudicca died shortly after the battle. However, there's absolutely zero evidence that any of this actually happened. In fact, the only source that claims that Boudicca was defeated is a letter written by the Roman governor, Suetonius, to the Emperor Nero, and given that the letter was written by the guy who was trying to put down the rebellion, you can imagine that he might have had a little bit of an incentive to exaggerate his victory just a little bit. What happened next is pure speculation. Some historians believe that Boudicca was killed in the battle, but this is not supported by any evidence. Others believe that she survived the battle and continued to lead the rebellion for several years, but this is also not supported by any evidence. We simply don't know what happened to her after the Battle of Medway, but it is safe to say that Roman suppression of the revolt was a major blow to the native Britons and paved the way for the eventual conquest of the island. Now, whether or not Boudicca really executed all of the Roman prisoners that she captured, as Cassius Dio claimed, is debatable, but it is clear that she was a fierce warrior who was willing to do whatever it took to avenge her honor and that of her people. Her story has inspired countless works of art and literature, including the classic novel Boudicca by Rosemary Sutcliffe, as well as numerous poems, plays, and films. Today, she remains a symbol of resistance against tyranny and oppression, and her legacy continues to live on in the hearts and minds of people all over the world. And with that, ends the tale of the warrior queen who avenged rape. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, then please hit the like button and leave us a comment. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more badass historical tales like this one. Until next time, my friends, stay safe and stay awesome.